Is Mark Bristow planning to leave Barrick Gold in 2028? We have a report from Africa Intelligence. The CEO is quietly preparing his succession, scheduled for 2028. I looked on X. They are the only people reporting this. AfricaIntelligence.com. So, as we did with the Africa report more than a year ago when we started hearing rumblings of the Loulo-Gounkoto mine, I share it here with you as simply what it is, a report online, and so we'll have to see if that story is verified and developed. Hello and welcome to the Northern Miner Podcast. My name's Adrian Pocobelli. It's so always interesting to follow Mark Bristow, one of the leaders of the mining industry, I think we could say. For example, we think of Tier 1 asset, and that term, that is a Mark Bristow term, as far as I understand, and that has gained widespread use across the entire industry. We see Mark Bristow's pioneering revenue-sharing deals, and I think of, Papua New Guinea, and there are others. And he was attempting one of those pioneering deals in Mali, but there is intransigence, it seems, on the government of Mali's side. And of course, those, I believe it's 4 employees, continue to be detained, to put a nice word on it, in Mali for doing what? So potentially, big news for Barrick there, courtesy of Africa Intelligence. Just while we're on the gold front, there is a big M&A. In Australia, Gold Road agrees to $2.4 billion takeover by JV partner Goldfields. And that is by Christy Batten on mining.com. And this followed an earlier bid, which Gold Road felt was too low, and they rejected it. So it has happened there in Australia. So a little bit of M&A as gold hovers just below $3,400. Also on the gold front, we got Sean Boyd of Agnico Eagle calling for a Canadian Arctic strategy amid U.S. threats. This is Reuters via mining.com. Agnico Eagle Mines, Canada's biggest gold miner, wants the new government to develop a formal Arctic strategy in response to U.S. President Donald Trump's threats to make Canada its 51st state, the company's chairman Sean Boyd said. Earlier this year, Agnico overtook Barrick Mining's market capitalization to become the world's second largest gold miner, just below Newmont, the largest extractor of bullion by production and market capitalization. Agnico is expanding its Hope Bay gold project in Nunavut, the northernmost province of Canada that borders the Arctic Ocean and Greenland, and wants the incoming Canadian government to promote investment in infrastructure in the Arctic. It is quite amazing that the infrastructure has not really been developed yet. You'd think with all of the potential riches, if not anything else, even the communities, that there would be more, that this wouldn't be the huge issue that it is. And here's a quote from Sean Boyd. Quote, "It's noise, Trump's threats, but as a country, we have to take it really seriously. And we've been calling for a more formalized, structured Arctic strategy in this country," end quote. He said the company would be, quote, "way more forceful," end quote, going forward to advocate for the Arctic strategy with Ottawa, because it sees the opportunity for growth in the north. Quote, "It's pretty clear, based on the U.S. interest in Greenland and the U.S. administration's comments around Canada and critical metals, that Canada needs to focus more on the opportunity that exists in Canada's far north and in the communities and in the people that live in the far north," end quote, Boyd said. Hope Bay is expected to come back into production by early next year after the company put the mine in care and maintenance in 2023 to focus on drilling its resources. Agnico, one of the few gold miners with assets in Canada, is betting big on the country, even as some of its other peers look to sell their domestic assets. Its strategy has paid off with investors as its share price has jumped by 45% year-to-date, making it one of the best-performing mining companies among its peers, Refinitiv data showed. Earlier this month, Bloomberg reported that Barrick Gold, another Canadian miner, was looking to sell its only mine in the country. However, Boyd has ruled out Agnico buying the asset as it's too small. Quote, "We've really got a strong pipeline of bigger projects, so our strategy isn't to pick up smaller things and try to make them better," end quote, he said. And finally, Canada's north has some of the biggest mineral resources in the world, including gold and other critical metals, but it has poor infrastructure compared to the rest of Canada. Nunavut Premier P.J. Akiagok told Reuters last month that the threat from the south of Canada means it is time for the new government to step up and build the basic infrastructure in the region. Quote, I think there's an incredible opportunity here in the north to bring different corridors through, Akiagok said. So very interesting. I mean, as I've long maintained here, when you consider the resources and frankly just the landmass of Canada, in a sense, and I think a lot of people are implying this, the country is punching below its weight class when you just consider the fundamentals and you also look at the small population. When you look at that dynamic, I mean, how do you have an economy that is struggling? It's kind of interesting. I mean, you compare it to the Middle East where they have huge resources and it's a much different story. Continuing on, U.S. private sector delegation heads to Greenland. This is Reuters. So the U.S. continues its push in Greenland. A U.S. private sector delegation led by a former Trump administration official is set to visit Greenland this week to explore investment opportunities in the Arctic island's vast natural resources. U.S. interest in Greenland, a self-governing territory of Denmark, has increased since Donald Trump took office in January, causing political tension with Copenhagen. Trump has refused to rule out taking Greenland by military force if Denmark won't sell it. This visit marks the first by a private sector delegation to the Arctic islands since the election of Jens Frederik Nielsen of the pro-business Democratic Party as its premier. The delegation includes representatives from mining firms, Critical Metals Corporation, Cogency Power, American Renewable Metals, and Refacture. Drew Horn, CEO of GreenMet and former Chief of Staff of the Office of International Affairs at the Department of Energy during the Trump administration, will lead the group. Quote, I'm not trying to do anything crazy like orchestrate a purchase or acquisition of Greenland by the United States, end quote, Horn told Reuters. Quote, we're looking simply to do traditional private sector business development, end quote, he said. Horn said he believes that capitalization and legitimate private sector growth will facilitate greater collaboration in an independent Greenland backed by U.S. private development. The delegation plans to visit the Tanbreeze mining deposit, one of the world's largest rare earths deposits. And we're kind of always back to the processing. It's all going to ride on the processing. As we've long said here, in a sense, you can find all the deposits in the world, but if you still have to send it to China to be processed, it's kind of a moot point where it gets mined, I would argue. Horn said he believes that Greenland's openness to private sector investment will bolster its independence and ensure a viable business model. The delegation will also visit Copenhagen at the beginning and end of the Greenland trip. So it continues in Greenland as we move across the world with the U.S. scouring, really, for natural resources. I mean, isn't this the headline behind the headlines here? U.S.-Ukraine sign long-awaited minerals deal. And I've been talking about this, frankly, once again, for years, that this is top of mind in the highest offices of the land, and I'm not even done with Ukraine. We're going to talk about Ukraine, and then we're going to go to the Congo. So here we have Canada, we have Greenland, we have Ukraine, we have Congo, all of these mineral-rich land masses. So here we are, northernminer.com, U.S.-Ukraine sign long-awaited minerals deal. This is by a staff writer at northernminer.com. The United States and Ukraine have signed the long-awaited minerals agreement after months of negotiations and some drama, sealing a deal that the Trump administration views as a key step in ceasefire talks with Russia. The agreement, quote, signals clearly to Russia that the Trump administration is committed to a peace process centered on a free, sovereign, and prosperous Ukraine over the long term, end quote, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said in a statement late Wednesday. Ukrainian Economy Minister Yulia Suridenko also confirmed the deal on social media in a post on X. She wrote, together with the United States, we are creating the fund that will attract global investment into our country, end quote. And so this is being called the United States-Ukraine Reconstruction Investment Fund. Very interesting. Now, what does this entail? The deal, as first reported by Bloomberg News, will grant the U.S. priority access to new investment projects involving critical materials such as aluminum, graphite, oil, and natural gas. It also establishes a reconstruction fund managed by Washington through which profits will be funneled. Now, Javier Blas, the Bloomberg columnist who wrote The World for Sale, had a pretty pertinent tweet in regard to this, as he said on May 1st. Now the U.S.-Ukraine deal is all about oil, natural gas, and a bit of aluminum. And the critical minerals? Rare earths? pointing out the emphasis has shifted in this deal to aluminum, graphite, oil, and natural gas. The fund is intended to support Ukraine's recovery and offset future U.S. military assistance, the draft of the agreement reads. The deal secures U.S. finances and provides Ukraine with safety through an American presence in the country, Trump told a cabinet meeting on Wednesday, according to Bloomberg. Now, we got a few headlines afterwards. A column from Reuters via mining.com. U.S.-Ukraine deal is heavy on symbolism, light on minerals. And also from Reuters via mining.com, U.S.-Ukraine may wait a decade or more to see revenue from minerals deal. And another headline, this is from Reuters, Ukraine's mining heartland tells Trump, don't take advantage of us. So seemingly this deal has come through, but the focus has shifted from rare earths really to oil and gas, graphite and aluminum. Continuing on with this underlying headline behind the headlines, U.S. scours world for natural resources. Here's the latest subheadline of my meta headline. And this is Reuters. Exclusive. U.S. pushes Congo, Rwanda for peace accord and billion-dollar minerals deal. This is by Andrew Mills at Reuters. The U.S. is pushing Congo and Rwanda to sign a peace accord at the White House in about 2 months, accompanied by bilateral minerals deals that would bring billions of dollars of Western investment in the region, President Donald Trump's senior advisor for Africa told Reuters on Thursday. Quote, when we sign the peace agreement, the minerals deal with the DRC will be signed on that day, and then a similar package, but of a different size, will be signed on that day with Rwanda, end quote, Masad Boulos said in an interview in the Qatari capital, Doha. A U.S.-backed peace accord would come amid an unprecedented advance by Rwandan-backed M23 rebels in Congo, the latest cycle of violence in a decades-long conflict in a region rich in minerals including tantalum and gold. Rwanda denies backing the group. Rwanda and Congo are expected to submit separate drafts of a peace agreement on Friday, according to a peace process agreed in Washington last week as part of diplomatic efforts to end violence in eastern Congo. The Congolese government did not immediately respond to Reuters' requests for comment. In mid-May, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will meet in Washington with the Rwandan and Congolese foreign ministers in an effort to agree on a final draft peace accord, Boulos said. Now, interestingly, the M23 are not in this discussion. And also, the M23, from what I saw in a report, they just took over another small town. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens to them within this whole negotiation. Finally, in this Reuters article, but before the accord can be signed, Boulos said, Rwanda and Congo must finalize bilateral economic agreements with Washington that will see U.S. and Western companies invest billions of dollars in Congolese mines and infrastructure projects to support mining in both countries, including the processing of minerals in Rwanda. Quote, the agreement with the DRC is at a much bigger scale because it's a much bigger country and it has much more resources. But Rwanda also has a lot of resources and capacities and potential in the area of mining as well, not just the upstream, but also the midstream and downstream to processing and refining and trading, end quote, Boulos said. Boulos said U.S. and Western companies have told Washington they would make multi-billion-dollar investments in the region once the bilateral minerals deals are signed. Boulos also said before the White House signing ceremony can go ahead, Washington expects both countries to address a number of security concerns. For example, Rwanda must pull its troops out of Congo and end its support for M23 rebels. Congo must address Rwanda's security concerns with militias such as the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, or FDLR. Boulos said that on Wednesday, a follow-up committee was appointed to monitor both countries' progress towards the peace deal, which includes the U.S., Qatar, France, and Togo, which is representing the African Union. So again, Congo continues to be at the center, really, of so much that is happening in the supply chain, in the mining industry, in geopolitics. And here on the 6th of May, we have a headline from Times Live, DRC and Rwanda submit draft peace proposal, Trump advisors say. So a draft peace proposal has been submitted a few days later. As it says here, Masad Boulos, who is Trump's senior advisor for Africa and the Middle East, said on X on Monday he welcomed, quote, the draft text on a peace proposal received from the DRC and Rwanda, end quote, describing it as an important step towards peace. So things moving pretty quickly, and scrolling down a bit in this Times Live article, M23 is not involved in the talks in Washington, though Lawrence Kanyuka, spokesperson for the rebel alliance that includes M23, told Reuters last week, quote, we encourage any peace initiative, end quote. Meanwhile, fighting in eastern DRC continues. Mark Hazuke, a spokesperson for the DRC's army, on Saturday accused M23 of seizing the town of Lunyasenge on Lake Edward and said the DRC, quote, reserves the right to retaliate, end quote. So it continues in the DRC. Also, moving up to the Sahel, Niger-Russia enter technical partnership on mining operational efficiency. So we're seeing more partnerships in the Sahel with Russia. That is courtesy of blueprint.ng, I assume a Niger website. As it says here, the government of Niger State has entered into partnership with the St. Petersburg Mining University in Russia to provide technical assistance focused on improving operational efficiency, environmental sustainability, and safety management in mining activities. And of course, we saw Norgold start making inroads in Burkina Faso last week. And finally, tragedy in Peru, 13 killed in Peru, mine kidnapping amid rising violence. This is Cecilia Jamasmi at mining.com. 13 security guards kidnapped from one of Peru's largest gold mines were found dead on Sunday in a brutal incident that underscores the worsening security crisis in the country's Amazonian Pataz province. The victims, employed by private security firm R&R, had been dispatched to confront individuals involved in illegal mining when they were abducted by a criminal group attempting to seize control of the Poderosa gold mine. The men were taken on April 26 and held in a mine shaft, where they were threatened for days. According to local news site Diario Correo, a video circulated on social media, allegedly filmed by the captors, shows the guards being executed at point-blank range. Quote, Poderosa laments the death of 13 workers who were cruelly murdered by criminals allied with illegal mining, end quote, the company said. So more violence in the Amazon. And we also heard from the company, quote, it will not be possible to defeat criminality if, despite our repeated requests, the police continues to refrain from entering and interdicting the illegal mine entrances which are used as a base and shelter by criminals, end quote. Peru's Interior Ministry confirmed that special police units had been sent to, quote, locate and capture those responsible for these heinous crimes, end quote, but gave no further details on the attack or its perpetrators. Illegal gold mining in Peru was worth more than $6 billion in 2024, according to the Peruvian Institute of Economics. The violence tied to it forms part of a broader regional crisis, with Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia all declaring or extending states of emergency this year in response to criminal activity linked to mining, narcotics, and extortion. So, just unbelievable numbers there. Coming up this episode, we have Youcef Larbi, General Director and Chief Geologist at the Cree Mineral Exploration Board. We discuss the work that the CMEB is doing in Quebec, and really how they are helping facilitate communications, dialogue, and just really understanding between the local Cree communities and mining companies, and the very just crucial work that the Cree Mineral Exploration Board does. So a very interesting and pertinent interview with Youcef Larbi coming up this episode. As well as on our spotlight, we have Syntax's Nick Cecil and Steve Housinet, who discuss the latest SAP software implementations for mining organizations, the benefits of the public versus the private cloud, and more. So a fascinating spotlight coming up this episode. If you want to find us online, you can find us at northernminer.com. You can find us on X at Northern Miner. You can find us on Instagram at The Northern Miner, and on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, where we also host these podcasts, and wherever podcasts are available, including Spotify, SoundCloud, and Apple Podcasts. And with that, let's turn to Nick Cecil and Steve Housinet of Syntax for this week's Spotlight. Joining us today, I'm very pleased to welcome to the Northern Miner podcast for this week's Spotlight, Nick Cecil, Enterprise Asset Management Solutions Architect at Syntax, and Steve Housinet, Industry Principal for Mining at Syntax. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us, Adrian.
It's great to have you guys. It's an interesting area that you guys are in as far as helping provide the software for organizations. And so, what challenges do early stage mines face that enterprise resource planning or ERP can help solve?
Typically junior mining companies have limited staff, sometimes decentralized operations, and their requirements evolve over time. ERP systems such as SAP bring a much needed structure, visibility, and automation to core functions like finance, procurement, and inventory management, helping young mines establish a strong foundation from the start. As many of these companies are developing, they also look for support in asset management or operational readiness, ensuring that their digital assets represent their physical assets. Steve, anything you want to add here?
One thing that mining companies basically face is the attraction and retention of staff. Communicating well what your infrastructure is in terms of system from planning all the way to, pit to port is important. It's not necessarily a direct benefit from a communication standpoint, but it's definitely an indirect benefit.
Okay, excellent. So what Syntax does then, just to clarify, Syntax helps implement softwares or organizational architecture like SAP. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're one of SAP's platinum level partners, and we're a systems integrator that helps drive those deployments.
Excellent. And most of this happens on the cloud. Is that also correct?
These days, most solutions go either private cloud or public cloud. Yes.
Okay, excellent. And so let's discuss that then. What is the difference, say, between working with a private cloud and a public cloud for enterprise resource planning or ERP, and which is better for early stage mines?
That's a really good question. I think I'll start off with the SAP private cloud. It really does offer some greater flexibility and customization, which results in greater complexity. And that ends up requiring more time commitments from resources and can ultimately result in higher cost. It does fit a larger, more complex operation because they have less controls ultimately. Some examples of that might be some really complex reporting, massive data analytics, complex supply chains, and IoT. On the other hand, SAP Public Cloud is ideal for junior mining companies because it's a faster deployment for those companies that might have limited resources based on best practices for the mining industry. It has lower total cost of ownership and provides a scalable foundation that enables growth and innovation over time. While you still have that great extensibility, the core design is less customizable to ensure that you keep a clean core. However, the reason for that is you want to make sure that that clean core supports all of the planned upgrades.
Right, exactly. So if you start customizing things too much, then it starts getting too complex down the road. So say for an early mine, then the public cloud makes more sense. Steve, do you have anything to add?
Yes, it provides the more discipline from a governance standpoint so that your OPEX, don't balloon down the road.
Okay, excellent. So why is SAP Public Cloud then a good fit for young mining companies?
Yeah, SAP Public Cloud enables early stage mines to go live quickly. They adopt those pre-configured best practice designs and avoid that technical debt. That's the typical debt that Steve just mentioned that's incurred by highly customized solutions. So with the SAP Public Cloud, mining companies will enjoy some of the continuous updates to get the latest features and built-in innovation. And it provides the flexibility and speed that growing mining companies need without sacrificing enterprise-grade capabilities.
And Steve, do you have anything to add to that?
It debunks a myth that ERP deployment is expensive. Just to put relative to cost, going up to a public cloud is a fraction of the cost of a drilling rig or a haul truck. And adding modules is basically equivalent to one of the expensive tires that is fitted on a haul truck. So this is also very important to keep in mind to build infrastructure when it comes to enhancing productivity relative to the equipment that the mines most of the time need to produce and to be productive.
Okay, very interesting. And of course, the mining industry and technology, it changes rapidly. So how does SAP Public Cloud then help, work alongside these innovations, say AI, and can it, take advantage of new innovations like automation and AI?
Yes, I mean, automation and AI nowadays can go hand in hand. One of the very relevant benefits of AI innovation that is provided by SAP Public Cloud is a bunch of automated procurement workflows. Nick mentioned that junior mines basically operate with, fewer staff, lesser staff, and therefore having as much as automated routine workflows approval, it's paramount. So one of them, if you think, it's from raising a requisition to cutting a purchase order, as long as you have the policies in place, AI can automate the workflow without waiting for the person in charge who would be dealing with more value-added activities to act upon it. It provides all the smart insights by collecting the data from sensors and various IoT-enabled devices to sort of enable uptime through predictive and maintenance, which is an area where Nick excels as an expert. Like real-time operational reporting, predefined analytical apps are embedded in SAP for HANA.
Okay, excellent. So put it all together here for us then. What practical advice, say for any, young miners, as you call them, what practical advice do you have for them in terms of if they're looking for an SAP solution, how should they approach this whole issue of, the technological infrastructure for your organization? Do you have any advice for these people?
Yes. What those mining companies need to think is where are they in their life cycle? So there's very much a, best practice approach where SAP says for where you are in the life cycle from early stage development to shovel ready, already, ramping up to nameplate capacity. These are the types of functionalities that needs to be provided by an infrastructure such as ERP. And this is something that we need to keep in mind. The other one is, what are their pains as well as the aspiration? What are the budget constraints? What are their strategy with respect to building an IT or digital infrastructure? And the last one is where do they also put themselves from a maturity standpoint? They could be two mining companies could be the very same life cycle, but they may have different maturities for various reasons. So these three approaches that we provide are not mutually exclusive. They can work together. This is where you are in life cycle. This is where your pain and aspirations are. This is where your constraints are. And this is what we recommend based on SAP best practices and mining best practices.
Nick, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think Steve covered off on a lot of good topics from an operational standpoint. I think I'd focus a little bit more on the technical side. So I would focus on the core needs first and then expand, use the industry best practices to avoid reinventing the wheel. Choose a cloud platform with built-in innovations and opportunities to extend the solution. There's things like mobility, reliability, artificial intelligence, and reporting to keep up with their ever-changing business requirements. Where innovation is required, focus on extensions through the SAP Business Technology Platform known as BTP, rather than trying to develop something in your core and keep that clean. And finally, work with a partner like Syntax who have deep mining experience and align your technology with your growth plan.
Okay, excellent. And if people want to get more information or advice, what should they do?
They can go to syntax.com or contact Nick Cecil or Steve Housinet directly.
Excellent. Nick Cecil, Enterprise Asset Management Solutions Architect, and Steve Housinet, Industry Principal for Mining at Syntax. Thank you for joining us and sharing all that you're working on the Northern Miner Podcast.
Thanks, Adrian. Appreciate you having us.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
And thank you once again to Syntax for sponsoring this week's episode of the Northern Miner Podcast. If you want to learn more, visit syntax.com. Turning to the website, fascinating development here in the context of the tariff discussion. Albemarle CEO says, quote, math doesn't work, end quote, for U.S. lithium refinery project. This is Reuters via mining.com. Albemarle's stalled plans to build the largest U.S. lithium refinery remains on hold due to the ongoing global glut of the battery metal that has dragged down market prices, the company's CEO told Reuters on Thursday. And indeed, we are seeing new lows even this week, as we will discover in metal prices. That market malaise leaves the U.S. without a major site to process lithium. the cornerstone metal of the energy transition, and essentially dampens efforts by U.S. President Donald Trump and other Washington officials to bolster the country's minerals supply chain and curb its reliance on China. The U.S. refines only small amounts of the ultralight metal and has only one lithium mine in Nevada controlled by Albemarle. Last year, the company paused plans to build a $1.3 billion processing plant in South Carolina, due in part to overproduction from Chinese rivals. While lithium prices can vary by region and type, an index of prices tracked by Benchmark Minerals Intelligence has dropped by 74% in the past 2 years. Quote, "We've been wanting to build this Western supply chain. The economics just aren't there to build that plant out in South Carolina," end quote, Albemarle's CEO Kent Masters told Reuters. Quote, "The math doesn't work today," end quote. The company, which posted better than expected quarterly results on Wednesday, has a lithium price at which it would resume the project's development, but Masters declined to name it. Quote, "We don't have the confidence to say where the lithium price is or where it's going, which is why we've kind of gone to the strategy we have of making sure that we can compete at the bottom of the cycle," end quote, said Masters. Western mineral supply chains may need some kind of government support in order to develop projects and offset global competition, he added. Quote, "I don't think private companies are going to be able to do it on their own," end quote, Masters said. Very interesting. It continues. While Rio Tinto and other rivals have been buying lithium assets during the downturn, Masters said that Albemarle has yet to find an interesting target. Quote, "We don't have that war chest to go out and look at M&A activity the way we might have if prices were at a different level," end quote. In Chile, Albemarle is pretty focused on its work in the Salar de Atacama, and while it considered bidding to access other salars, the company, quote, "didn't find them interesting," end quote, Masters said. So interesting development there. Continuing on, CIA's venture capital arm invests in Colorado-based critical minerals startup. So again, our meta headline, U.S. scours world for resources, this by a staff writer at mining.com. Colorado-based critical minerals extraction startup Alda Resource Technologies announced Monday it has expanded its Series Seed funding to $10 million, with the close of an additional $4.4 million investment. The investment was co-led by DCVC and Voyager Ventures, with participation from Orion Industrial Ventures and InQtel, a nonprofit strategic investor and the CIA's venture capital arm. I didn't realize the CIA had a venture capital arm. Alta said the new capital will accelerate development and commercialization of its platform, which uses engineered proteins to selectively bind to and separate critical minerals, including rare earth elements like neodymium and dysprosium, from low-grade ores and complex waste streams. The company said the approach aims to dramatically reduce the environmental impact of mineral extraction while helping to secure domestic supply chains for essential materials used in advanced electronics, clean energy technologies, and modern defense systems. Alta said its technology offers a timely and a scalable solution, a low-impact way to extract high-purity critical minerals from unconventional and previously uneconomic sources. Quote, "Securing resilient, low-impact sources of critical minerals is no longer optional for America and its allies. It's a strategic imperative," end quote, Alta's co-founder and CEO, Nathan Ratledge, said in a news release. He continued, quote, "Washington is beginning to respond with the kind of wartime urgency this moment demands, and Alta's technology is uniquely positioned to deliver. Our protein-based platform gives the U.S. a scalable way to tap into unconventional mineral resources right here at home, while slashing both costs and environmental impact," end quote. By customizing proteins to bind selectively to individual elements, even at low concentrations and complex mixtures, Alta said its solution offers greater precision than conventional separation methods, and that the result is a step change in the efficiency, sustainability, and economics of processing rare earths and other critical materials. Very interesting. Jessica Diamond, VP of Technology at IQT, said, quote, "Alta's protein-based platform demonstrates the promise of engineering biology to address significant national security challenges. We are excited about supporting Alta's technological innovation to diversify the nation's sources of critical minerals and advance domestic processing capabilities," end quote. And also on this front, Pentagon's AI metals program goes private in bid to boost Western supply deals. This is Reuters via mining.com. So the U.S. is firing on all cylinders to scour the world for natural resources. As it says here, a U.S. government-created artificial intelligence program that aims to predict the supply and price of critical minerals has been transferred to the control of a nonprofit organization that is helping miners and manufacturers strike supply deals. I remember this story. Launched in late 2023 by the U.S. Department of Defense, the Open Price Exploration for National Security AI Metals program is an attempt to counter China's sweeping control of the critical minerals sector, as Reuters reported last year. Now, more than 30 mining companies, manufacturers, and investors, including auto giant Volkswagen, have joined the Critical Minerals Forum nonprofit and will be its first users, according to Rob Strayer, a former U.S. diplomat and the organization's president. Quote, everyone in the critical minerals sector is looking for more price transparency, end quote, said Seth Goldstein, a lithium industry analyst with Morningstar. Quote, any tool like the CMF that could help would be welcome, end quote. Other members include copper miner South32, rare earths producer MP Materials, and defense contractor RTX. The CMF held its first meeting with members in November. The privatization and CMF's membership have not previously been reported. Armed with the AI model, the CMF aims to help manufacturers curb their reliance on China by signing more metal supply deals with Western mines, according to more than 24 industry consultants, purchasing agents, analysts, regulators, and investors, who told Reuters the program reflects one of the boldest efforts to date to transform the way certain metals are bought and sold. Finally, the goal is for the AI model to calculate what a metal should cost when labor, processing, and other costs are factored in, and Chinese market manipulation is factored out, and thus give buyer and seller confidence in a deal's economics. Some deals with the CMF are beginning to take shape. Nevada officials this week said they would work with the CMF and its AI model to help attract copper smelting to the state. The U.S. has only 2 copper smelters and as such imports nearly half of its demand for the red metal. The program has already faced skepticism over whether it can achieve the goal of transforming the long-established ways metals are bought and sold. Yet it aimed less at heavily traded metals, such as aluminum, and towards lightly traded metals or metals that see heavy overproduction from some in an attempt to sway market pricing. For example, the CMF model could help manufacturers forecast available nickel supplies in 2028 if the U.S. were to impose a 100% tariff on that metal from Indonesia, the top global producer. That data could then help a manufacturer determine whether to invest in a U.S. nickel mine or agree to buy its future production, a step that would help obtain financing for a mine's construction. In such a scenario, the nickel buyer would use the AI model's data to negotiate a long-term deal for guaranteed supply, regardless of whether Chinese miners boost production and drive down market prices as they have done in recent years. The CMF's aim with the AI model does assume that a buyer would be comfortable paying more than the market price for a metal if supply were guaranteed. Very interesting developments here. So maybe the LME has something to be concerned about here. Continuing on, U.S. Commerce Department launches steel and aluminum, quote, inclusions process. This is Reuters via mining.com. Just a couple of lines here. The U.S. Commerce Department said on Thursday it had commenced a new process to allow U.S. manufacturers and trade associations to request the inclusion of derivative aluminum and steel articles under Section 232 steel and aluminum tariffs. So the key word here is derivative aluminum and steel articles. They want to add, I think, to the metals tariffs. And continuing across the world, traders down LME copper stocks as Chinese market tightens. So we were reading about this last week. So the copper market continues to tighten in China. This is Bloomberg News via mining.com. Traders including Trafigura Group and Mercuria Energy Group are drawing down stocks of copper on the London Metal Exchange as strong Chinese buying tightens the market for the bellwether metal despite fears of recession. Trafigura was behind a major part of just over 20,000 tons requested for withdrawal on Friday, according to people familiar with the matter who asked not to be named as the information isn't public. The orders cut available inventories of copper on the LME in Asia to the lowest in a year. Mercuria and other traders have also been taking delivery from the LME in recent months, the people said. Bloomberg previously reported that Mercuria had been a major buyer of copper on the exchange. The withdrawals come amid growing signs of tightness in China. The Shanghai copper market is in the steepest backwardation in nearly 2 years, and inventories on the exchange witnessed record drawdowns. Traders say that Chinese copper buying has been strong in spite of concerns about the trade war with the U.S. At the same time, the threat of tariffs on American copper imports has spurred a rush to ship copper to the United States, draining stocks in the rest of the world. Continuing on, supply risks trump demand concerns, according to Cameco's CEO. This is Frederic Tomesco at the Northern Miner. Global utilities have their work cut out if they hope to secure enough uranium to meet demand over the next 20 years, Cameco's CEO Tim Gitzel said. Some 70% of utilities' uranium needs through 2045, about 3.2 billion pounds, remain uncovered, Gitzel said Thursday during a conference call. This includes about 1.3 billion pounds for which the source of annual primary production isn't yet known, he said. Quote, full-cycle demand is durable and stronger than ever, but as we keep emphasizing, the risks to supply are far greater than the risks to demand. Despite the long-term uranium price remaining near its highest level in over a decade, the industry is still not seeing the level of long-term utility contracting necessary to support both brownfield expansion plans and the significant investment in new projects that will be required to meet growing future demand. End quote. Global uranium reserves could be exhausted by 2080s if demand for nuclear energy keeps expanding at its current pace, Paris-based Nuclear Energy Agency and the United Nations IAEA warned last month. Well, 2080s is more than 50 years away. I don't know what the IAEA is doing predicting the 2080s. Who knows if we're even going to be using nuclear power in 50 years. Let's continue. Rio Tinto eyes rare earth sector. This is by Christy Batten. Rio Tinto is considering a move into rare earths and other critical minerals as it responds to shifting global market dynamics and trade tensions. Following the company's annual general meeting in Perth on Thursday, CEO Jacob Stausholm said the board had discussed rare earths this week and would take, quote, a serious look, end quote, at their potential role in Rio Tinto's portfolio. Quote, so you could say the next thing is to look a little bit deeper on critical minerals, and you have to think about that, not necessarily as separate mines, end quote, Stausholm told reporters. He noted critical minerals are often present at Rio's operations as byproducts, so, quote, it's a question of whether we should process them more deliberately, end quote. We also got an update on this story, which we followed very closely 5 years ago. Rio Tinto has not fulfilled core pledge 5 years on from Juukan, Aboriginal group says. So as longtime listeners will remember, the Juukan heritage site was blown up by Rio Tinto. And we had many discussions on this. Hard to believe that was 5 years ago. This is Reuters via mining.com. Rio Tinto has not modernized its agreement with an Aboriginal group on whose land it mines iron ore, failing to fulfill a commitment made 5 years ago when it destroyed an important Aboriginal heritage site, the group said on Thursday. Rio Tinto pledged to reform its business practices after it blew up the 46,000-year-old Juukan Gorge rock shelters in Western Australia in 2020 for an iron ore mine. The destruction sparked a huge public and investor outcry, a government inquiry, and ultimately the exit of its CEO and chair. I remember that story very well. What a scandal that was. Deanna McGowan of the Roby River Kuruma Aboriginal Corporation said at Rio Tinto's annual meeting in Perth that the Mesa J mine, the company's largest on the group's land, had been operating for 30 years. Quote, you have paid us for 3 years, end quote, she said. When Rio Tinto negotiated the agreement with the group's elders 20 years ago, executives had said there was no need to include the mine because it would soon close, she added. Quote, and here we are now, 17 years of payment that Rio has cheated us at Mesa J, end quote, she said. Rio Tinto Chair Dominic Barton said the company was committed to reaching an agreement on the issues raised by McGowan. Quote, we want to be able to get an agreement and a resolution working with you. We've had a number of conversations and we'll be having after this meeting as well, but there is a very, very strong commitment to work through these issues with you, end quote, Barton said. So the Juukan Gorge story resurrecting, one would think Rio Tinto would be doing everything in their power to let that one rest in peace. And finally, a couple of headlines here. Canada lays 200 charges against ArcelorMittal for alleged violation of Fisheries Act. And another headline, Caterpillar sees lower 2025 sales should Trump tariffs stay. Those are your news stories. Now, let's take a look at metal prices. And turning to metal prices, let's take a quick look at the bond market. For context, the U.S. 10-year bond is yielding 4.36%. That is 0.13% higher. The UK 10-year gilt is also higher, yielding 4.55%. That is up 0.05% on the week. The Italy 10-year bond edges slightly higher at 3.63%. That is up 0.01% on the week. And the German 10-year Bund yield is also higher at 2.53%. That is 0.03% higher on the week. And the Japanese 10-year bond bucking the trend, yielding 1.26%. That is 0.06% lower on the week. So the U.S. 10-year bond yield, again, moving towards that 4.5% mark. Turning to precious metals, gold is trading at $3,388.70 per ounce. That is $62 higher on the week. Silver is trading at $33.52 per ounce. That is 49 cents higher on the week. Platinum is trading at $953.80 per ounce. That is down $32 on the week. And palladium is trading at $933.50 per ounce. That is down $8 on the week. So gold and silver higher and platinum and palladium lower. Turning to industrial metals, copper is trading at $4.65 per pound. That is 18 cents lower than last week. Iron ore is trading at $98.19 per metric ton. That is $1.73 lower than last week. Aluminum is unchanged at $1.11 per pound. Lead is lower at 88 cents per pound. That is 2 cents lower on the week. Nickel is at $7 even. That is down 11 cents from last week. Tin is trading at $13.92 per pound. That is down 59 cents on the week. Cobalt is unchanged at $15.29 per pound. Lithium continues to fall at $9.35 per kilogram. That is down 8 cents on the week. Uranium is trading at $69.80 per pound. That is $3 higher than last week. And zinc is down a penny at $1.19 per pound. Zooming out, gold and silver recover, while industrial metals edge sideways, perhaps reflecting the uncertainty in the market. And those are your metal prices. Coming up, I'm very pleased to welcome for the first time to the Northern Miner podcast, Youcef Larbi, General Director and Chief Geologist at the Cree Mineral Exploration Board, or CMEB. We discuss the important work that the CMEB is doing in Quebec in order to facilitate better communications between mining companies and Indigenous communities that helps move resource development in Quebec forward. I hope you enjoy the interview, and I will see you on the other side. Joining us today, I'm very pleased to welcome to the Northern Miner podcast, Youcef Larbi, General Director and Chief Geologist at the Cree Mineral Exploration Board. Youcef, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be with you guys and give me this opportunity to talk about the organization working for and about the Crees, actually, and what happening in the land.
If you could you tell us a little bit about the Cree Mineral Exploration Board and a bit of history of the organization and what you guys are up to?
Well, what happens in Quebec and the Crees start talking a long time ago. Actually, started with La Convention de la Baie James, or James Bay Convention, which is, political state in certain way, because the Crees were talking with Quebec concerning hydroelectricity and things that happening in Youcef, the land, the Cree land, the Cree territory, conventional territory. And they signed an agreement later, they call it La Paix des Braves, which is happened in the 2002 with the Grand Chief Ted Moses. And at that time, the mining activities were very quiet, but the Cree thought about something interesting, which created the Cree Mineral Exploration Board as an organization to take care of the events that gonna happen. They have a good idea because some mining activities started here and there on the land. So CMEB been created at that time. So it was in the convention of La Paix des Braves, which is the agreement signed between Quebec and the Crees. And in this convention, chapter 5, and I think is the bullet 20, something like that. I don't remember exactly, but still, this opportunity to, gave to the Crees to create our organization. And I start exactly at that time, in 2002. The mandate being given is to manage the mining activity and the development of the mining in the territories. So it was one of the most important elements in terms of the history. So it gives a lot of credibility to this organization to work with the companies who's going to come to the territories. And everything came at the same time. As soon as we had this convention, this agreement actually, the companies, they start just coming. It was the beginning of everything. And the CMEB was appeared in the right time because in the same time, there was a discovery in the area of Wimminji. Wimminji is up north, completely near the Radisson and near the hydroelectricity dams that we had everywhere not everywhere, but some places on the James Bay, Inushchi, the land of the Crees. So it was a good timing. And from there, we start working, planning, trying to have, I had to see what we can do to make it easy for the companies when they come to the territories to explore. And what's the most important is educating the population.
Okay, so very interesting. So then the practicalities of this then, so if an exploration company, say, comes to Cree territory, say the EU Ischchi territory, in a sense, it sounds like you have kind of a double mandate, which is perhaps, and help me out here, is it if a company wants to do business or wants to explore in your territory, is the first point of contact or one of the points of contact is to really reach out to the Cree Mineral Exploration Board. And on the other hand, is it also to, as you say, maybe educate the people in the Cree territory as far as, what's involved when an exploration company or mining company comes in, what might take place? Is that a decent characterization?
Absolutely. I think you have a great view, even if I didn't talk to you about this already. But I think this is exactly how it was taught, exactly how you say it. The idea is to have an organization with a lot of mandate. The first one was, of course, the development was very important for the Crees because they were thinking, okay, we want to develop the territories because mining is the most important thing that we have on the land. And we don't have a lot of forestry or things like that, especially when you get over of parallel 54. So the leaders, they thought we have to develop this respecting the tradition, respecting the culture, respecting the people, and especially respecting the land and the environment. So that was, I think, it was a good opportunity to create something that give a path, that give a guide to all the companies and the people who live there, because we had a big job to do. If we compare for example, the Abitibi in Quebec or even in Ontario, Timiskaming, Abitibi, the mining had been developed a long time ago. So the people were aware. Awareness about these activities were very clear. Well, not necessarily clear, but everybody has an idea, and most of the people knows about it, and they can deal with it. The thing that we didn't had in Iushchi, so the people, we don't want them to be surprised. So the first thing we start is really doing work of education, deeply work education. So we went to the schools, and I did it myself actually at that time. We went to schools, went to the leadership. We talked with everybody, like the community, some meetings here and there, some presentations, and especially talking about what is mining, what is exploration. I have to make this difference, which is important for us. Exploration and mining is completely two steps different, that we face them differently. So when we have the exploration, which is the most important, and this is what it is for us, and I'm going to come back to what you said, we definitively the point where the company should start every time they come on the land. So was the idea, to have somebody to guide them through all this way to be of the Crees, the land itself, and especially how it's divided. Like, for example, I'm going a little bit deeper because I think it's important. The Cree land, differently to the other communities or the other nations, because the Cree nation is a huge territory and it's divided on cells. They call them trap lines. Each trap line, it's managed by a tallyman. Tallyman is, or tally person now, because we have women right now, and even we have youth. It used to be, when I started, it used to be just elders. And these people, they watch after the land. They watch after the rivers, they watch after the trees, they watch after the animals, and they manage this for their hunting seasons, for their fishing seasons, for everything. So it's important for them, the land. And it was very important, we guys, to make the link between the expression companies who come in the land and the Taliban themselves and the leadership itself. So this step was very important by educating the people, but also managing or creating a certain way, a guide for the companies, for our people to react if they need to react.
Okay, excellent. Very interesting. And how are you finding it working? In a sense, do you find that this is a successful way of approaching this issue? It seems like a reasonable, kind of pragmatic way of approaching it. If you're a company, you come in, these are the people you talk to, and you're helping again. Because, I mean, a lot of the issues that, in a sense, mining companies might have with communities is often based on misunderstandings on both sides, right? So is it working?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think you really put your finger on something very interesting. This is the main issue. Actually, we want that the companies work properly, that the companies work in peace, which is very important because you can't develop if you don't have all the conditions to create this development with the respect to everybody. So no, it was very important for us to create this link, and we were mandated to do that. So if the company come on the land, we have a procedure, and this procedure consists of informing. As soon as the people take claims, now you know that we take them on internet, and we don't have to go on the land and put some posts and etc. So now we take them on internet, and as soon as they take the land, we ask them to communicate right away with the leadership of the community, with the Taliban, and with us. Of course, we guys will have to, we make a file for each company to see how the communication has been all this time during they are working. And in Quebec especially, we have an important phase when the companies start doing some drilling or some not major or some important work. They have to fill out a document, they call it ATA, which is a document that they have to prove to the government of Quebec that they already had this communication with the locals. And we guys, we've been doing that since a long time ago. So the process is already there. The people were happy to work with us because they say, hey, well, you're very well organized. So we didn't even have to change our way to work with you. And it's very important because the companies, when they start coming in the beginning, they didn't know exactly what happened. Now everybody knows CMEB. We create a lot of links with, for example, the Association of Mining and Exploration in Quebec, with the government of Quebec itself, that they promote us. They talk to the people and they try to say, hey, what happened in the region? So you should talk to Youcef on CMEB. And CMEB is an organization based on good members of the board. We have a board, a very important board. The board is members are from the Cree Nation government, and we have one member from the government of Quebec, because they help us to do this work, which is very important for us. So it's the link created. As soon as the link is created, it's become easy for us. When I go to the PDAC or I go any other conference, the people come to me and say, "Hey, you guys, you're doing tremendous work." And we've been doing that since the beginning. I mean, 2002 when we started, but we always kept going. In the sense of creating something accessible to everybody, especially for the mining companies. We have companies coming from Australia, we have United States, we have from Europe. So it was very important to be known. This is the first step. And the second step was create something clear to the people to get it easy. Because if we want a development, we have to make it easy for everybody, especially for our people. And that was really the beginning of the beginning, creating a post or a point, a checkpoint where the people can come in and have the most of the information.
Well, it almost sounds like you're and just to wrap up here, it almost sounds like you're almost like a diplomatic facilitator, so to speak. It kind of de-risks the political side to a certain degree, because not every mining executive is necessarily a diplomat, so to speak. And, diplomacy is not a skill everybody has. Let's put it that way. I mean, is that a fair characterization?
Absolutely. I think it's a really, the people tell it to me, I don't want to be cocky on this because you need certain skills definitively, and in terms of communication, and you need to be open to the culture because it's not my culture when I come in, and the Cree says they are so nice people, so hospitable people. So as soon as I get there, it was very important for me to understand how the people think, what the people want. in a certain way. And in the other hand, I had to manage some stuff that I was mandated for, which is the development, the exploration development especially. So it was important to create a good link with the other companies. Yes, I think we need certain skills. Diplomatic maybe, but it's more communication, open the door. Like I say to the people, look, we guys, we look for solutions. We never look for problems. So just come to us and we start talking, and even invite them to the community to meet the people. I go with them and, having a coffee, and we talk and see how things can go better if they have some issues here and there. Honestly, till now, I cross my fingers. Till now, all the issues that we had been resolved easily with the communication here and there, and some effort from the both sides. And yeah, probably you're right. You need somebody with certain skills in terms of communication and diplomacy.
It makes a ton of sense. Youcef Larbi, General Director and Chief Geologist at the Cree Mineral Exploration Board, thank you for joining us and sharing everything you're working on in Quebec.
Well, thank you. It's a real pleasure to be with you guys, and I really like it. And this opportunity for the others to see what we are doing, and we'll be happy to help if there is some organization want to talk about that and how we build that, and how the Crees worked very hard to get this organization on and create this way to communicate and to make it easy for everybody.
Fabulous. Well, come back on the program and keep us updated, Youcef. Very interesting work you're doing.
I will. Thank you so much, Adrian.
Thank you once again to Syntax for sponsoring this week's episode of the Northern Miner Podcast. If you want to learn more about their enterprise cloud solutions, visit syntax.com. And also thank you to Youcef Larbi of the Cree Mineral Exploration Board for appearing on this week's show. And thank you, dear listener, for continuing to support this program. If you want to help out the podcast, please leave us a review in the Apple Podcast directory, share it with your friends, and until next week, take care.